back to Weekend Breakfast with me, David Bull. The wife, Rennie Hundekamp, is in the house as well. Lots and lots of messages coming in this morning. My goodness, so many. This is obviously hit a nerve. Ian says, oh, so that's where my pyjama top went. Well, thank you very much for that, Ian. Also, God bless Renee. Your passion and fight for the human race is admirable. That's regards from Ricky the Bricky.
Thank you.
Hi, doctors. You are both great, says Simon in Essex. Thank you very much. It seems to me that the more we know, the worse the whole thing gets. The world is mad. I am not going to go with this. Everyone has to push back. This is Simon in Essex. David, it's time Stonewall took a back seat. We should ignore them. They are a pathetic bunch. That is from John in Wallington. Lots of other things coming in about Brexit. I will talk about those in just a minute. Good morning, David and Rennie. This Stonewall thing. Who are these people? Can we not name and shame them, says Gary Shotton. It's about time the majority called them out. Asking a man if he's pregnant is absolutely madness. And this one, I'll just finish on this. David and Rennie says, Barry, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm 62-year-old man. I was asked by a nurse if I am pregnant. I'm sorry, I refused to answer that question, and I didn't go, and I didn't get my treatment because I refused.
Well, you see, that's the danger of this. Firstly, the danger is people missing screening. So women with cervixes will miss 50% of women who don't know what their cervix is, yeah? Just asking for women is fine, but people with cervixes isn't. And Barry missed his treatment. This is the actual real danger.
I agree. Joining us this morning to run through all of this morning's papers is Dawn Maria France. She's Editor-in-Chief of Yorkshire Women's Life, and we're delighted that you're back.
And so am I, and thank you for having me.
Oh, no, always such a pleasure to see you. You've got a lot to go through this morning.
Oh, God, I so have.
Yeah, right. So what have you got first? So I think you've got The Sun. Are you going to start there?
So I've got The Sun on page 2, and the headline is the SNP faced a poll loss of 21 MPs, and that's a new YouGov poll.
Yeah, tell us more.
So I think that there's a number of things to unravel here. I think it's also to do with the poor education in Scotland, the issue with drugs, the issue with the health system, and my favourite one, drum roll, where is the £600,000 for the Indy 2? Does anybody know?
No.
I know there's an investigation, so I've got to be careful.
Well, so this is absolutely right. There's 600,000 missing. Also, there was a loan of 100,000 which wasn't declared in the parliamentary interest for some considerable time. I think what's fascinating about this is that as support for independence appears to be dwindling, this is a major opportunity for Labour, and they know it.
Thank you.
Indeed.
I was just going to say that what this actually means, and it's interesting in The Sun that it's a tiny little strip rather than a headline, is this actually is really, really bad news for the Conservatives. Really bad news, because it was Scotland going SNP that really cost Labour dear.
That's right. So they went from 40-odd seats down to 1, didn't they?
Yeah, and so now they can have a whole... Instead of going for a hung parliament, they may well get a majority.
Well, it's interesting because the Telegraph's also reporting that Labour is within touching distance of overtaking the SNP in Scotland. That's according to the same poll, isn't it?
This is true, but also... there was a couple of articles regarding whether Adam Graham was actually Isla Bryson. So there was an article in The Scotsman by Susan Daglett, and she asked the question that this particular issue was what finished Nicola Sturgeon. I don't know if you remember all those interviews.
Do you think it was?
I don't think it helped. I looked at the interviews and she did look rather clumsy.
That's
she not
really
Rennie?
kind.
And being very diplomatic.
I thought she looked like she didn't know what she was talking about.
Absolutely agree with that.
I thought she demonstrated how impossible it is to say that a rapist with a penis is a woman. That's what she demonstrated, and she couldn't. And it tripped her up, and she won Plank of the Week for it.
And she's still deserved to win Plank of the Week for that. But I think with her not being able to have a decent conversation, she did get herself tied up in knots. She did come across as not statesmanlike, and she did make a situation that's important.
But it's really interesting, this, because you see, the thing is, Nicola Sturgeon, and I was nice about her at the week during breakfast this week, because I said, actually, you have to admire her dogged determination and what she's achieved as a woman, you know, as First Minister. But she was so blinkered, I think, by the end, that she believed she was right. She didn't listen to anyone, and the majority of people in Scotland were opposed to the gender reforms.
Yes.
They were indeed, and she didn't give anybody space to have a different opinion from herself.
She did, but I think you make actually the crux point of this, which is that I don't believe that Nicola would have stood down over the gender reform law because she is so blinkered and so determined and so believing in her own views. I think there has to be something else, and I think it will be coming soon.
So do we go back to the £600,000?
Yes, we do.
That might be. I think it's a bit of both. The £600,000 and also the way that she came across in those interviews as not being really passionate about what she said she believed in. But I think that I don't think she was an ally to the LGBT community. It felt like she came out with this policy because she knew that England would be against it, and it looked like she could just say, look, I'm trying to bring this through, and look at England trying to block me. She used it as a political football.
So that's really interesting to show divergence with the rest of the United Kingdom. So she could then say, when the UK government then enacted the Section 35, which they've never done before, to then say, right, look, they don't listen to what we want in Scotland, therefore we need independence.
That's exactly what I think.
Now, interestingly, her other undoing was to say the next general election was a de facto referendum on independence. Now, even those people who were pro-SNP didn't want that. They didn't like it, and they rejected it.
But she also said it was a once-in-a-lifetime referendum, didn't she, initially, when we had that conversation?
Everyone did.
I think referendums never seem to be what people say they are.
Yeah,
Good
well,
point.
Oh, don't start that. We'll talk about Brexit in just a minute, but I think what is fascinating about this is that I don't know whether anyone, I mean, it was really interesting actually, because I spoke to Ian Blackford this week, and I said, did you know this was coming? And he said, oh yeah, we spoke about it. I don't think he did know it was coming. I don't think
he did, to be fair.
Apparently, I mean, everyone was on half term. Nobody expected that press release. Apparently, they were scrabbling around desperately trying to find out what was going on.
But you see, what this does now is, what does it do for the SNP? No leader, no succession plan.
And the thing is, with Nicola Sturgeon, although she did it for 8 years, she was instantly recognisable. I can't think of anybody that was as recognisable as her.
Agreed. And here's the other great fact. I think when she became First Minister, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer weren't even MPs. So that shows you how long she's been there. I think the SNP is in big trouble.
I do absolutely agree with you.
So interesting, isn't it? Let's move on now. And The Guardian. What have you got from The Guardian?
Right, so The Guardian, on page 39, anger over the NatWest pay rise.
Ooh.
So we need to remember that the bank is still 44% owned by the taxpayer. So this pay rise of their leader, Alison Rose, of 5.2 million, the pay package, to me it's...
Sorry, my face just dropped.
To me, I find it quite alarming in the cost of living crisis. So sometimes it feels like it's levelling down as opposed to levelling up. So we've got these excessive profits, 32.2 billion for Shell, Centrica, who own British Gas, 33.3 billion, and NatWest at 5.1 billion profit, and the rest of the country are struggling. It just feels wrong, particularly as we still own the bank and we bailed it out.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look, this is just crazy. These people have no understanding of the real world, do they? They are completely out of touch with, people. I actually think the MPs should have rejected their pay rise, even though it was only 2%. So to take a 5.4 million pay rise is just beyond the pale.
Nice work if you can get
I mean, yes, it's great that NatWest have made profits because we own it and we wouldn't want it to be making a loss, but we've already bailed it out, which is why we part own it. I mean, this is silly.
It just seems to me, yet again, it's us, the consumer, that bails everyone out when they're in trouble. We get them, we literally resuscitate them, get them back up. They make exorbitant profits. They prosper. No one takes the rap for any of this. And as you rightly say, people can't afford to put cash in their electricity meter.
True.
And we're being absolutely fleeced.
We are. It's absolutely shocking. I mean, I read recently that a gentleman in Yorkshire was using his own funeral payments to pay for his gas bill, and that just broke my heart. So you've got real struggles of people really suffering, and then you've got this ridiculous figure for a bank that we still publicly own.
She's not playing for Manchester United as well, is she, in her spare time or something.
It just,
well, we're talking about that later as well.
it's just, as I said, it's levelling down, not levelling up.
It really is.
And I feel like the divisions between the haves and the have-not is getting worse.
See, so we talked about this on Breakfast all week about with Centrica's profits, for example. What's the answer? Do we impose another windfall tax? I don't really think that's right because it's regressive. They already pay a huge amount in tax.
Why don't we reduce the prices of the people that are...
Well, you might think that's a great idea. I mean, also there are concerns over how much of that is domestic. British Gas, for example, the domestic side of...
But that's semantics, isn't it? They can organise their accounts in that way so that they can say, oh, look, it's not domestic.
Yeah.
I mean, all of this worries me terribly. Over the last 3 years, David, we've seen the biggest transfer of wealth from the poor to the wealthy that we have ever seen.
I know. I mean, you and I were talking in Makeup earlier about the price of goods and consumer goods, for example, and I happened to mention body moisturiser as one of those things.
And prune juice.
And prune juice, we were talking about that. It's a very weird morning here at TalkTV, but it's so noticeable. You go into these stores and stuff that was £3 is £6.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that's sustainable.
And it's never going down.
No. So inflation running at 10.1%, but you're right, it's never going to come down. And this just seems absolutely wrong. Let's move on to the Daily Telegraph now.
Yeah, so
this is a really interesting story.
Yes, so this one, because we're living in such a serious time, I thought I'd throw this in because this is like clown world. So, so this organisation have said that Joe Biden may have shot down their hobby balloon. And you would make you laugh, Dr. David. So the Bottle Cap Balloon Brigade said that one of their inflatables went missing in action shortly after the balloon was shot down by Biden. So they think it's their balloon, is what they're trying to say.
I'm trying to imagine these people who get their kicks out of sending off balloons and then welcoming
each
them back.
to his or her own.
Yeah, so they said that their balloon was in the same space at the same time, so they think that was shot down, not the Chinese balloon.
This is on the back of, obviously, the US shooting down the balloon from China. That one they've recovered and obviously packed full of sensors and electronics, all the rest of it. The other ones, the other three, I think there were, they've no idea where they were.
But they're also still saying that original one packed full of sensors was probably a weather balloon. It probably really was. I mean, look, I go back to what I said last week, that I think this balloon story is a distraction.
Yeah,
I think it was designed to distract us from all of the other nonsense.
Distract us from what?
Everything, all these stories, the Northern Ireland Protocol, that we must agree before Biden visits Ireland.
But hang on a minute, no, it must be something American, mustn't it?
Well, it could
if it
be.
is a distraction.
There's so much going on in the world that affects all of us, it really does, that I just feel it was a distraction. We covered it relentlessly on every channel in the UK, every front page.
Yeah.
We did.
Almost to a farcical level.
I agree with you. I think it was a distraction. It feels like it moved us away from the Northern Ireland Protocol and other real issues. Yeah. Because, as you said, all the journalists were covering that out, covering the balloons.
I mean, there's also, and we've talked about it before, there's also been, and you sent me a message this week about some of the COVID vaccines, for example. There's increasing data coming out that, of course, no one's talking about because they're all talking about balloons. Is it that? I don't know. Obviously, it's interesting, isn't it, the editorial style? And it is a bit like they dangle something in front of the journalists.
Bad news day.
Yeah, bury things on a bad news day. Yeah, exactly right. Okay, let's move to the Times now.
Right, so the Times on page 2, and the headline is bus fare caps at £2 for a further 3 months. So I think that is a good idea to keep the cap on buses. But what I find, if you're outside of London, the bus service is pretty poor. And
you mean terrible?
Yeah, okay. It's really terrible. For example, you're waiting allegedly 10 minutes, but it's half an hour. So I think rather than just look at the pay cap freeze, they need to look at making it workable.
Well, of course, and also, you see, not everyone can afford a car, but also we're being forced off the roads anyway with the price of everything. So fine, but you have to provide transport. Now, where I live in a rural community. I think we have a bus twice a day.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, really sad. And, some small villages have no buses anymore. So you've got elderly people who live in a village where there's no bank, no buses.
No pub.
You know, no pub. What are they supposed to do? Apart from the isolation and loneliness, what are they supposed to do? So I agree with you, capping fares is good, but not at the expense of supplying a service.
No.
True.
But I'd like it to go further. Let's look at rail travel. I mean, that's just astronomical now.
And the service isn't that great. So coming down from Yorkshire, the train that I was supposed to get cancelled. And then
On the day?
It cancelled on the day, and then so what happened was everybody was waiting for that train, and I said to my colleague, everyone will get on the next train. Everyone got on the next train, and there was an announcement, we're not going to move this train out of the station because it's full. Yeah, but you've cancelled the train, so everybody's going to go on that train.
Hang on a minute, what do you mean you can't move it because it's full?
Oh, listen, they made the announcement, it was quite sinister. Yeah, it was quite sinister, and they said, well, the train will be going nowhere because it's dangerously full. So people need to come off that train and go on another train, and no one was moving.
Of course.
The British Spirit.
But how about providing the service that we're paying for?
Precisely, they should have done that. So no one was moving. Everyone sort of dug deep into Britain. We're not moving.
Clinging on to the furniture.
Yeah, they were clinging on.
The last time I used a train was actually home from Doncaster with Alice 8 weeks old, with a pram, a baby, bags.
And no one gave you a
sat on my train. No, I'd booked a seat.
good.
I sat on my train, having manoeuvred myself onto it, and same thing happened. Announcement: this train has been cancelled. So I sat there looking. How am I going to get this baby, this pram, over to the next train? Where is the next train? It's just...
So interestingly, there's a story in the papers this morning, and apparently there's some technicality where they can cancel the night before the train operators, and it's not classed as a cancellation. So in fact, all the figures are being massaged. It's something called a P something or other. But so that again is another problem. So it feels that the statistics we're being given about 95% of the trains run on time isn't actually accurate.
It isn't at all. I mean, some people did come off the train eventually, and then it did move. And then the train stopped at because it said anyone that's going to Wakefield or Doncaster, can they please get off the train and go onto another train? So they did. And then the train stopped at Doncaster and Wakefield. Oh, it was pure comedy hour. It was ridiculous.
Well, no, I share your pain. I've been on trains like that many times in my life. The Mirror, page 2.
Yeah, so the Mirror, and this is so Labour, and nobody write me, please don't email me, but it really is. The headline is Parent Class on Crime Kids. So they want to have classes for children that carry knives, and this is an idea by the Labour Shadow Justice Secretary Steve Reeds. So he's pledging to help parents tackle responsibility of tackling repeat offenders who carry knives. Why can't the parents take responsibility? Why do you have to have a class to tell parents that children shouldn't carry knives? It's just overreach.
Why are those children carrying knives in the first place? Maybe the point to start here is when these children are babies, and reopen all the Sure Start centres and just give parents some help from the very beginning, rather than once it's too late. Because once a child starts carrying a knife, I hate to say it, but the path they are on is a bad one.
It's really interesting, actually, and we spoke about this again. It made the headlines during the week about particularly young black men who feel that they have to carry knives to have some sort of place in society. I think that's a major problem. Also, you've got escalation across the board of kids carrying bigger and bigger knives.
I'm also going to put some balance into this.
Yeah,
this concept that it's young black men carrying knives, it is in London. In London, without a shadow of a doubt, it's young black men carrying knives and killing each other. Outside of London, it's white boys.
That's interesting.
It really is.
And why do you think there's the difference?
Well, I think in London you obviously have a more immigrant population. You have more black people generally as a percentage of the population. So I think we need to just not...
So it's really kids, basically.
It's kids, and it's generally poor working class kids in underprivileged areas who see no hope for the future or have difficult family home lives, and so they're looking...
But you see, I agree with you totally about the parents. What's the role of the parent? But also, for me, you know, when you look at the video games that they're all watching and all that kind of stuff, I just think that the whole perception of reality has changed so dramatically because we're living in an increasingly violent online world, and I think that has part of it.
We are, but good parenting teaches children that is not reality.
Yeah.
So my son, when he was quite young, used to play Grand Theft Auto, which was absolutely horrifying when you watched it. But he was brought up in such a way to have values and understand that that was a video game, and this doesn't happen in real life.
Well, Final word to you.
Well, yeah, but I just don't understand why there's a class. I think that, as Rennie said...
It's too late.
Dr. Rennie, sorry. Dr. Rennie.
Renee.
No, so I think that the parents have to have some responsibility.
Yes.
I don't think it's the responsibility of the government to have these classes. The parents need to take control of the situation. And the short start, I think that was a brilliant idea, and maybe that should come back just to support parents.
Wise words from you. You should be in government, you know. Dawn Maria, thank you very much indeed. Really nice to see you again. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. After the break, we're going to have all the sporting headlines. Tom Clayton's somewhere in the world, so he's not here. Nick Ellaby will be standing in and telling us all the latest sporting news. This is Talk TV.